Dumelang, Sani Bonani, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the Virtual Symposium for Harnessing Data Science for Health Discovery and Innovation in Africa, organized by the National Institute of Health Common Fund. My name is Pulem Makhadibe. I'm here with my colleagues from No Innovation, and we'll be hosting this virtual symposium. So firstly, I'll give you an overview of the agenda today. First, we'll have welcome remarks and a brief overview of the program and the funding opportunities. And then we'll introduce the panelists. And then after that, we'll have a Q&A about the funding opportunities. After that, we'll break out into small clinics to have conversations to explore how to prepare for these funding opportunities. Then we will return to the main plenary where we are right now, and for some more Q&A and summary before we close. Let us begin with a welcome from the program officer at the National Institute of Health at the Fogare International Center, Laura Povlich.
Thank you, Puleng, and welcome everyone to the first day of the Virtual Symposium for Harnessing Data Science for Health Discovery and Innovation in Africa. Like Puleng mentioned, this is a National Institutes of Health Common Fund program that's being led by the Fogarty International Center, the National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering, the National Institute of Mental Health, and the National Library of Medicine. We call this program DSI Africa for short because we aim to support a new kind of health research program that funds data science, or DS, coupled with innovation, DSI. DSI Africa will be a consortium of awardees led by Africans that will be funded to spur new health discoveries and catalyze innovation in healthcare, public health, and health research on the continent through the application of data science. The interactive panel that we have scheduled for the next 2 weeks really emphasizes the key priorities of DSI Africa, including multidisciplinary and multi-sectorial partnerships for health impact, innovation and entrepreneurship in data science for health, training of the next generation of leaders in data science, an understanding of the ethical, legal, and social implications, or ELSI, of data science research, and a fostering of research community networks across Africa through data ecosystems and gateways. We also are planning to host a marketplace on August 13th, a partnership and innovation marketplace, where participants can learn more about each other and complementary initiatives happening in Africa and around the world. We'd love to know which of these events are interesting to you. So please let us know if any of all interactive sessions you think you'll attend through the poll that will come up through the screen. If you've already filled this out and told us your preferences, you don't need to do it again, but if you haven't, we'd be grateful to get a sense of your interests now. Today's session focus on the 4 DSI Africa funding opportunity announcements. These include the research hubs, the research training program, the ethical, legal, and social implications research awards, and the open data science platform and coordinating center. The goal is to provide information on these opportunities, answer as many questions as we can, and provide technical assistance through breakout funding clinics that will happen later in this session. We hope that the session will inspire you to participate in the rest of the virtual symposium as well. We're thrilled to have over 1,400 registrants from nearly 60 countries registered for this meeting, and hope that participants will not only find this meeting informative for learning about DSI Africa, funding opportunities, and the current health data science efforts in Africa, but will also leverage the geographic, disciplinary, and sector diversity of meeting attendees through the networking opportunities and tools provided in the meeting platform. We're certainly very excited to have you all here. Thank you.
First of all, it's important to tell you that the session today is going to be recorded, both the plenary and the breakout clinics. You'll be able to view them on the NIH YouTube channel if you want to see them again. We've been soliciting questions from you over the last week. Many of you have left virtual post-it note questions on our KaiStorm page, and we thank you. And for today, if you have more questions for the panel during this webinar, please use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen to ask questions of the panel. And if you see a question that you really appreciate or that resonates with you, please give it a thumbs up and endorse it as a worthy question. I will tell you that we are a large group. I don't think we can possibly answer all your questions today, but we'll do our best. And it helps us to know that the questions that you have are there so that the NIH can make information available to you, if not today, over the next couple of weeks. What else? Social media. If you tweet or use hashtags on various social media platforms, here are some we'd love you to use. So make sure that they're in the chat. That would be DSI Africa, NIH Africa Data, or No Innovation. So with that, I'll hand it back to Laura Povlich and the rest of the panel. I'll let her introduce them to you, and that'll help you learn more about these funding opportunities. Laura?
Great, thank you, Maggie. Hopefully everyone has seen the pre-recorded videos that were posted a week ago and screened right before this session. But we will also do a brief overview of these funding opportunities, which include the DSI Africa Research Hubs, Research Training Programs, Ethical, Legal, and Social Implications Research Awards, and the Open Data Science Platform and Coordinating Center. The presentations went over the higher level objectives of DSI Africa, including consortium participation and collaboration, partnerships, data sharing, community engagement, and data science capacity building. We reviewed each funding opportunity announcement, including the goals, eligibility, key dates, research or research training objectives, and unique features of each opportunity. Just to refresh your memory, we'll introduce ourselves again and summarize our funding opportunities, and I'll start. Besides being the co-coordinator for this initiative, I'm the lead program officer for the DSI Africa Training Program funding opportunity. This opportunity aims to increase institutional capacity to carry out data science research and innovation in Africa through the support of Institutional Research Training Cooperative Agreement Awards. Applicants will propose long-term data science health research training through graduate degree, such as master's or doctoral training and faculty development. Additionally, grantees will train cohorts of African investigators who will have the skills to become independent investigators, research leaders, and research collaborators. This is the one funding opportunity through DSI Africa that is open to both African institutions and US institutions in partnership with African institutions. I'll hand it over to my colleague, Brad Newsome, to introduce himself and briefly summarize the research hubs.
Hello to you all, wherever you are in the world. My name is Brad Newsome. I'm a program officer here at the Fogarty International Center at the National Institutes of Health, and I'm overseeing the Research Hubs U54 Cooperative Agreement, which is a multi-project, multi-center cooperative agreement where you have the opportunity to make a consortium, a hub of different research, including at least 2 research projects, as well as facilitating cores that enable you to coordinate the work that you're doing within your hub, but then also with the broader DSI Africa Consortium that includes all of the research projects, the ethical, legal, social implications research, the training awards, as well as our data coordinating center. And this is an incredible opportunity to think big about how you can utilize data science to push forward innovation in Africa to address health issues in a specific area or throughout a region. And this program utilizes the U54 mechanism, which is a cooperative agreement, but this is a special mechanism because it allows you to do those multiple projects as well as multiple cores. It's in some respects a complex opportunity to work together collaboratively. Now, the program goals overall for this, for the research hubs specifically, is to just advance population relevant, affordable, acceptable, scalable data science solutions, and in the long term, demonstrate the ability of these solutions to improve health in Africa. There are many research opportunities associated with this, but at its core, it relies on an interdisciplinary team of biomedical scientists, computer scientists, engineers, social scientists to do cross-cutting or disease-specific or data-specific research. This is meant to leverage as best as we can existing African data sets and technologies and infrastructure wherever possible, or to create new opportunities for new collection of data. This program also relies on the utilization of very diverse data sets, very diverse innovative mechanisms to push forward multi-omics research, data associated with behavioral health interventions, and to expand informatic tools. I would encourage you to look deeply into the funding opportunity to understand not only the eligibility, which is meant to provide support directly to African institutions, but also to understand the complex structure of this award that, that relies on funding multiple research projects, pilot projects that are meant to expand over time to fund new opportunities, as well as multiple cores to facilitate both the administration and the data management of these awards. This is a clinical trial optional award. So, so if you have questions, there are incredible opportunities to look online and find out what you need to do to understand if your research that you're proposing is a clinical trial. So be very mindful of that. I would encourage you to look at the key dates. Many of these dates that are coming up with an application due date of December 8th. So this is the time to be thinking about your research and your partnerships, which involve those interdisciplinary teams. So be thinking now and looking forward to talking to you more during the further Q&A session. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Brad. Turn it over to colleague Jay Churchill to talk about the LC funding opportunity and introduce himself.
Yes, welcome. My name is Jay Churchill, and I am a program officer at the National Institute of Mental Health, and I have the fortunate opportunity to help shepherd and lead the LC efforts for this initiative. Specifically, well, first of all, I hope that you've had the opportunity to view the videos that played earlier today. If not, I know they are archived, and I would encourage you to look at those. That they provide some useful information regarding some of the structure of these programs. Likewise, there are most of this information, if not all of it, is contained completely within the funding opportunity announcement. And then I would also say that we're here to help. So if you have questions, please, please, please reach out to us. We are here to help provide guidance. So a couple of quick comments about the LC funding opportunity announcement. It emphasizes really the importance and the critical nature of carefully considering the LC, these ethical, social, and legal implications of the research that leverages data science approaches. We encourage researchers to thoughtfully consider how to integrate an LC framework not only into the design of the research, but also in contemplating the potential long-term implications of this line of inquiry. While it's clear that there are many important LC questions that warrant careful interrogation, we also believe that data science research will be strengthened by weaving an LC perspective into the research fabric itself. Indeed, applicants who successfully compete for the LC funding announcement will be strategically partnered within the research hubs as a critical partner once awards have been made. Again, if you have any questions, please, please, please contact me or any of the other program officers at the email addresses listed at the bottom of the funding opportunity announcements. I very much welcome the opportunity to chat with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Now we'll turn it over to Tiffani Lash to introduce herself and describe the Open Data Science Platform and Coordinating Center. And also afterwards, please, Ishwar, introduce yourself as well.
Thank you, Laura. My name is Tiffani Bailey Lash, and I serve as a program officer at the National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering, also as a co-coordinator along with Laura for this initiative. And I will also work closely with my colleague Ishwar Chandra-Swaran, who will introduce himself a little later. So today, I'm sharing about the Open Data Science Platform and Coordinating Center. This is a unique funding opportunity because there are two components for this particular initiative. There's the Open Data Science Platform core, and then there's the Coordinating Center core, and they're both funded under a cooperative agreement. I'll call it ODSP for short, and then CC for short for the Coordinating Center. So the ODSP, the Data Science Platform, will develop and maintain a scalable data sharing gateway available to the research community with access to disparate types of open and controlled access data and tools generated from the DSI research hubs, as well as other existing sources. We expect the ODSP core to deliver a software solution that enables discovery and the ability to harness the collective data into actionable insights that would exceed that of any individual data set and democratize access to and the use of the data through the use of what we call FAIR, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable principles. The goal is not to serve as a data coordination management center, but instead to serve as a gateway to the assets and outcomes of the DSI Africa research hubs. The ODSP awardee will support those research hubs who will maintain a single shared copy of relevant data. ODSP will work with the research training program to host training content developed by other consortium members, and also work with LC Research Studies to comply with and implement international data policy requirements in the software stack. For the Coordinating Center, we expect that the Coordinating Center will provide organizational framework for the management, direction, and overall coordination of all common DSI activities. We'd like to see the Coordinating Center assist in development and implementation of the DSI operating policies and procedures under the guidance of what we will have a DSI Africa Steering Committee. We expect to develop and maintain effective communications among participants in all of the DSI Africa elements, the working groups, steering committees, external advisory committees, and external stakeholders. We do expect the Coordinating Center to also develop and maintain the DSI Africa website jointly with the ODSP to function both as an internal resource for the storage and exchange of all DSI Africa documents and as the interface between DSI Africa and the broader scientific community and between DSI Africa and the public. We're happy to answer any questions when available. Ishwar, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Tiffany. That was a wonderful summary. And my name is Ishwar Chandramaulishwaran, and I am a program director at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And I'm delighted to join my colleagues here today to share and answer your questions about this exciting opportunity. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Tiffani and Ishwar. As we begin to answer your questions, let's do one more quick poll. Maggie has posted this for all of you to answer. But based on what you've seen and heard so far, which funding opportunity do you think you are most interested? We'd love to hear your answer. All right, let's begin answering some of your questions. And before this session, we received some questions on KaiStorm, but also are happy to take your questions through the Q&A here in this live meeting. There seem to be a number of questions related to partnerships and the idea of working with teams on applications. So maybe we can start focusing on that to begin. And one question that Brad, I think you can help answer is, do research hubs have to have partners from different countries, or can they be different partners in one country?
Yeah, that's a great question. And partnership really is at the core of the research hubs. As you can imagine, if you've had a chance to pre-screen the video or to look over the funding opportunity. Partnerships do not need to be in multiple countries within Africa. You can have them all within one country, but they do need to be multi-sectoral. So there have to be multiple partnerships as outlined in the funding opportunity, but at least one of those partners needs to be outside of academia. So again, you can have multiple countries represented or just one country represented, but they have to be multi-sectoral.
Great, thank you. So there's been a number of upvotes for a question about postgraduate studies, so I will take this one. Could you please elaborate on opportunities to undertake postgraduate studies, master's and PhD for interested people? Will there be any online degree programs available? So the funding opportunities themselves for the research training programs are to establish institutional programs that do fund master's and PhD students. However, the students themselves who are interested in these programs would apply to the universities or the organizations that are hosting these programs, not directly to NIH to fund their master's and PhD. We do allow the institutional research training programs to develop online training as part of their program, so that certainly could be part of it, but it's up to the applicants to decide what that training will look like. Moving on, I think there are multiple questions, I think, around the funding opportunities around the use of multiple PIs and how those partnerships can work. For example, there's a question now for the research training programs, is multiple PIs possible? Is there, do we have to have collaborators from outside Africa? So just to answer that first part of the question, multiple PIs are certainly allowed and are actually encouraged for all of the funding opportunities, not just the research training programs. And for, while US institutions applying do have to have a partnership with African institutions, the African institutions that apply are not required to partner with US institutions, but can come in partnership with any organization that they would like to do. So hopefully that answers that question. There is a similar question around whether funding could be team or individual. And again, NIH applications are submitted by organizations, but we do encourage teamwork and partnership in all of the funding opportunities. There's another question that Brad, perhaps you can help answer as well. Of how do you define African institutions? I saw for one of the funding opportunities that the institution cannot be a foreign office of a US institution.
Yes, so I'm glad that you noticed that, and I'm glad you're bringing it up. The FOA states, the funding opportunity states, that this has to be an African nation, institution, not, for instance, a US institution that is based in Africa, as an example. So when that occurs, we have many different affiliated institutions from the US in Africa, for instance, but as a defining factor of how you determine if you are an African institution or a US institution that is based in Africa, it really depends on your administrative structure, how your SAM and DUNS numbers are aligned within the country as the African institution, and that's where the administrative center is of your institution, or if that's in the US. So if you have an administrative center that is based in the US, you're not eligible to apply. But if that is in Africa, that makes you an African institution. I know it gets a little bit confusing, and I'm very happy to talk with you offline based on your specific circumstance around that to make sure that you're an eligible institution. But at its core, an African institution needs to be registered in Africa.
Thanks, Brad. It looks like we have a question here for Ishwar. Are you expecting the platform, I'm assuming this is referring to the Open Data Science platform, to also conduct automated analysis / data mining of the data uploaded by users? Or is it primarily intended as a research data management and publication platform?
Thanks, Laura. That's a fantastic question. The primary motivation over here is to make sure that the platform helps democratize access to data and tools. So while yes, it does need to provide access to tools developed by maybe the applicant that provides a platform, but also those that are developed by the research hub bodies as well as the larger community to do analytics over here. The primary motivation again is to enable democratizing access to the data and tools in a federated manner such that the community can bring the wealth of data, analytics and tools that they have each developed and share it with others.
Great, thank you, Ishwar. I'd like to have Jay address a question about the LC efforts. This is from a previously submitted question. Jay, can you clarify how the LC research efforts will be fully embedded and integrated components of the consortium activities supported by DSI Africa?
Yeah, sure, Laura. This is a really interesting question and one we thought about very carefully. I guess I would say a couple of things. One is that in the funding opportunity announcement, we've actually identified a few areas. They seem like they're the obvious areas that warrant consideration from an LC perspective. So that's sort of the background for this to begin with. But we also thought very carefully about this, that we want to ensure that the issues that are addressed through an LC lens are in fact critical to the research hubs, to the research being conducted through Data Science Initiative in Africa as well. So to answer your question then, the approach that we had is that probably two different approaches. One is that there are clearly LC experts on the continent who are already integrated with within some of the research areas at this point in time. So those are natural partnerships. But two, where there are independent projects proposed, we are going to sort of do a matchmaking thing after the fact, once awards are made, to ensure that these LC projects are fully integrated as an equal standing member of that research hub as well. So we will facilitate that process post-award.
Great, thank you, Jay. We have another question that's been upvoted by a couple of people, wanting to know, is there a way that NRENs, the National Research and Education Networks, can contribute to data science projects under this initiative? And certainly, we would be open to applications that come in with that partner with an NREN. I think it would be up to the applicants and the NREN organization to decide what that partnership looks like and what the NREN could contribute. But we certainly see them as a useful resource and potential partner for applicants as they are deeply connected to the infrastructure in Africa. Hopefully that answers your question. Another question, and maybe I can have both Brad and Ishwar address this. It's come up for both the research hubs and the open data science platform. Can the private sector be included as a partner in the hub or in the platform? And Brad, maybe you can go first.
Yeah, absolutely. Private partners are encouraged. Now, of course, you have to make sure that the lead institution is an African Institute of Higher Education or a nonprofit as the lead institution. But we very much encourage private partnership through most of these efforts. We know that this is key to success and sustainability of this program over time. So we very much encourage it as one of the partner institutions associated, but not necessarily as lead. A for-profit company can't be a lead organization outside the country, but we can certainly partner, and it's encouraged.
And on the open data science platform, as regards technology, absolutely technology developed by a commercial partner can be leveraged, and we in fact encourage jumpstarting and leveraging existing technologies that are already out there rather than building something up from scratch. The only caveat being that the technology must be available for licensing and reuse by anybody else. So it's not just exclusively for any one person or group.
Great, thank you, Ishwar and Brad. Another question that we actually get, I think quite often for all of our international programs has come up is, how high is your expectation for history of collaboration between African and US collaborators? For example, could it be a new relationship? Or do we have to demonstrate a history of a successful relationship? A lot of this, the kind of demonstration of collaboration, big reason why we do encourage applicants to have this is it tends to be something that will come up in the peer review of applications, that reviewers tend to like to see that, to see that the program is feasible because these groups have worked together in the past. However, it's not required. And we think there are oftentimes creative ways that applicants can show that they do have a strong relationship, even if their collaboration is relatively new. So certainly can think about ways that can demonstrate you've done activities together that maybe aren't publications, but other activities, or certainly thinking about writing very strong letters of support that really make your collaboration seem to be robust. Brad or Ishwar or Jay or Tiffany, is there anything you'd like to add to that regarding your funding opportunities?
Well captured.
Okay, all right, great, thank you guys. So we have another question for the Open Data Science Platform. Ishwar, could you elaborate? Would the award include funding for the infrastructure to run the platform?
Would the award include funding to run the infrastructure platform? Yes, in fact, the requirement is to get the platform up and running, as I mentioned earlier, leveraging existing technology components. And yes, it should be available up and running in the first year of the award so that the other research hubs and the other awardees and the larger community can in fact actually use it and leverage it. So yes, part of it does include operations as well.
Great, thank you, Ishwar. It looks like I have a question about the research training programs. Are the research training programs meant to be focused on establishing graduate programs, or are there other kinds of training programs eligible, such as curriculum development, lab training, short courses, or some combination? So we do require it's either establishment or enhancement of graduate programs. That is a key kind of foundation of the program. But along with that, we recognize there are other important components that I think enhance the capacity at the African institutions where these programs will be run. And so curriculum development is actually part of what we see as that capacity development, and is included in the funding opportunities. And applicants are welcome to suggest other types of training that would enhance the long-term training that's the foundation of the program. So that could include short courses or other kind of types of training that would be enhancing the graduate programs. Let's see, there's a rather long question that has also been upvoted, and let me see who would be appropriate for this to answer this. Okay, so typically, often applicants or potential applicants think of NIH awards as something that competitive PIs may have or would it be expected potentially to have a history of NIH funding. However, this FOA is focused on a young field and innovation, arguably best led by junior faculty. So the question says, could we advise on the desired PI qualifications for a competitive U54 Research Hub application? It says that, the groups, and this probably is true, many places could certainly have more senior faculty with a longer history of funding publications, funding and publications, but they're not sure how practical that would be and how impactful that would be. Brad, perhaps you want to take that on?
Sure. One of the strengths of this program is it relies on an interdisciplinary team. And multi-PI or PD is incredibly encouraged for this. So that may be a way for more of a junior faculty to then partner with with other people within a university or various other settings to strengthen perhaps that concern. And I know it's a concern. It often is a concern within review, and I'm glad that you're asking the question, but we do not discourage junior investigators to be a part of this. But again, the strength is in a team setting with this. So anytime that you can add an investigator that's had more NIH funding experience to your team, that could help your cause overall. Is it required? No. But during the review process, you want to be able to figure out where to plug any concerns that may come up during review. And that may be one way to do that, is just having a multi-PI setting where you have a more established investigator along with more junior investigators.
Great, thank you, Brad. We have a question now also about, it says, there are potentially some concerns about a DSI Africa program being a mechanism through which data could actually be exported or could leave the continent, and are wondering what mechanisms will be in place to prevent data from leaving the continent, or maybe you could think of it as preventing African scientists from being taken advantage of. And I will just emphasize for this that for the majority of the funding opportunities, that the principal investigators and the applicant organizations will be African. And we will, in the applications themselves, they will develop their own data sharing and data management plans that I think suit their needs of the applicants and applications. And once the consortium is formed, we'll have a steering committee that will develop its own kind of data sharing or access policies that again suits the needs of the consortium and thinks about the best ways that the scientists want to interact with each other and interact with the external community. We do certainly at NIH and through this program want to encourage open science as much as possible. But the data itself, I think we have to respect that, and it is expected that data will stay in the country where it's originated, and we will develop mechanisms for sharing when possible. So certainly happy to have more conversations about that in the future, but I hope that's helpful.
I can add something to that, Laura.
Go ahead, Ishwar.
And so I think it's a fantastic question, and is very important in the light of giving recognition to those that are generating data and giving credit to them. And that's the premise behind the Open Data Science Platform itself, and the concepts behind that to encourage a federated approach for accessing data and all the related assets associated. So I would encourage everybody to attend. In fact, the session exclusively is planned for that on August 19th. That will go into more details about the fundamental concepts, the new technologies that are out there that can alleviate that concern associated with data being moving from one location to another, or being used or leveraged inappropriately without credit for users.
Great, thank you, Ishwar. Moving on to another question. So some disciplines are complementary to and make significant use of data science, such as health services, comparative effectiveness, and health economics. Are hub/training opportunities available for practitioners of these disciplines? Brad, I'll have you address that first.
Sure. Again, back to the concept of an interdisciplinary team. The way that you intersect with data science and innovation is quite broad in the funding opportunity. We encourage social scientists and implementation scientists to be a part of these teams. So it's absolutely feasible to include that. Now, of course, you'll want to look at the funding opportunity to understand how to piece these broader implementation and health economics concepts into the data science and innovation criteria within the funding opportunity, but it's incredibly encouraged to form these interdisciplinary teams that include everybody from more basic researchers in data science all the way to implementation and behavioral sciences, and including certainly health economics, to really drive an outcome that is informed broadly to make sure that what you're developing is consistent with what is going to be feasible longer term and sustainable. So very encouraged. And I also encourage you to reach out to any of us when you have these kinds of more specific questions about how your team should be aligned, to make sure that you're still meeting the criteria of the funding opportunity and then going beyond to flesh out a really effective team for what you want to do with your research hub.
Great, thank you, Brad. And just to touch on that question for the training opportunity, while we do expect that programs will create long-term training that develops deep foundation in data science for participants, we're certainly open to applicants being creative in terms of the kind of health areas that are explored by the data science trainees, which could include some of the areas that were mentioned by the question. We can move on, I think, then to the next question. Someone just asking, can partnership also include institutions in Europe? And in general, yes, is the answer to that question. So applicants can propose to partner with anyone in Africa or outside, including in Europe or Asia or Latin America. One thing to keep in mind, I think, just as teams are being formed and partnerships are being developed, is each funding opportunity does have a limited budget, and so just have to make sure that that the partnerships and all of the personnel that are proposed, can fit within the budget that is set by the funding opportunity. So we have a broader question that I can also take. How does DSI Africa compare to H3 Africa with respect to overall goals? Can DSI Africa research projects include patient sample recruitment? So I'll start the first part of the question. I would say DSI Africa is similar to H3 Africa in some of the broader objectives that we had that I mentioned in the introductory talk. Certainly both consortium are trying to support African leadership in science, are trying to facilitate collaboration and partnership. I think H3 Africa focus is a little bit more on academic researchers partnering, and we're trying to think a bit broader about how academic researchers can also partner with researchers and scientists and engineers from sectors outside of academia. We both are encouraging and really focusing on the need for community engagement in the research projects, and also thinking about the ethical, legal, and social implications of the research that's being done, which is happening in both consortium. So certainly I think there are similarities and a lot of things that we've learned from H3 Africa. Also a lot of research that we're hoping to leverage potentially that's already being done on the continent. Perhaps, Brad, if you want to address the second part of the question here on research projects, including patient sample recruitment.
Sure. This is a clinical trial optional award. So you are able to do work with clinical trial, with patients or study participants in this. Now, of course, you need to be thinking about the kind of data that is going to be important to be collecting from humans versus from other sources. And we do want, as best as possible, to leverage pre-existing African data sets. Sometimes those aren't available, and we know that. And so where it's feasible to leverage African data sets, current information, current infrastructure, we encourage that. But when there is an area that you need to be able to collect new samples or new patient level data that relies on a clinical trial, you are able to do that. So again, that's another question to go into a little bit more in depth in person, perhaps, or with a one-on-one consultation. But overall, clinical trial optional, you are able to do that.
Great, thank you, Brad. I have a question I think Tiffani can answer for us. It says, since the Open Data Science Platform and Coordinating Center have distinctive components, can an institution have two different PIs for the two components?
For this one, let's see here. I believe you can have co-PIs for the initiative. We do expect they do have two distinct characteristics for the different cores. So you are able to have a co-PI situation.
Thank you, Tiffany. Yeah, and I would just add that generally that's true for all of the funding opportunities. There can be multiple PIs, and we recognize that we are asking for quite multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary programs. So it certainly is expected. Let's see. Related question. And maybe Tiffany, you can stay on to answer this one. Is it allowed for the multiple PIs? Obviously for the Open Data Science Platform and Coordinating Center, the main PI or the contact PI in the applicant organization has to be from Africa. But for the other PIs on an application, can they be outside of Africa?
Yes, they can. However, the primary, it has to be an institution from Africa, and we actually encourage, partnerships in that manner.
Great, thank you, Tiffany. So I think at this point, since we've answered a large number of questions now, we can wrap up this portion of the Q&A, and we will go over, or we will send participants off to different funding breakout clinics. These include clinic on case studies of successful NIH grantees, tips from peer review, a live demo of the application process, tips from grants management, who can talk to some of you, if you have budget questions, and they will go over some of that information, as well as a breakout on just making the most of this symposium. And so I'll just hand it back to Maggie and Fuling to tell you guys how to get there. Afterwards, we will try to address any more of your questions that we can, and also we'll make sure that we, if we aren't able to address your questions live, that we do it in the KaiStorm platform and in relevant FAQs. So thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Laura. Yes, in order to get to this webinar, you have to move through KaiStorm. And that's how you got here. So I'm going to actually share my screen and show you exactly what you need to do to get to your clinic breakout. So I imagine that you're on a page like this. This is the page for the plenary session. And down here is right where we are right now in the interactive panel plenary. You'll see below there are a number of the clinics. And if by chance you're not on this page, you can, remember, go over to the left-hand column and you can scroll down to Monday the 10th, and it'll bring you here, and it'll bring you to this page here, and you can come down and see Clinic 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, these are the clinics that were just described to you. And if you're interested, let's say you're interested in the live demo of the application process. You click on that one, and then you'll go in and you'll see this green Zoom button. And you'll click on that button and it will take you into a brand new Zoom room. Or maybe you're not interested, maybe you're interested, you can see another one, top tips from peer reviewers, another Zoom room, a different Zoom room, new Zoom room button. So that's how you get to the clinic of your choice. So we invite you to go to here, scroll down, decide which one you want to go to, and click through. But here's the thing, in order to get to the new Zoom room, you have to leave the old Zoom room, this one that we're in now. Not just yet, in a moment, but you'll do that by clicking on the red button that says Leave Meeting on the right-hand corner of your screen, and you'll leave this Zoom. You'll come to this page and do this scroll through and find out which session you'd like to go to, okay? So at those clinics, you'll have a lead person from the NIH who's prepared to share their information with you. You'll have a KI facilitator who will be there to assist you. The clinics are 20 to 30 minutes. And then we're going to invite you to come back to this plenary session. So you'll go back to this page here and click through to this Zoom, and we'll have a little bit more question and answer from the panel and a closing session and give you some information again about what's coming up the rest of this week and next. So if you're all ready, now is a good time to leave, hit the red button, go to the KaiStorm page, Scroll through the clinic options and pick the one that you're interested in going to. And we'll see you back here in about a half an hour.
Welcome back, everyone. We hope that you had a very informative and an insightful and an inspiring time in the breakaway room that you were in. And we're glad to see you here again. And before I hand back to Laura, I would like to know how you felt about the session that you were in. So do you have any words that can, maybe one or two words that can describe the impression about the session that you've had today? And I would like you to check the chat and go onto a poll and type in your word that describes the impression about the overall experience of the session today before Laura can take over. So check in your chat. There's a link to menti.com. Click on it, type in your word that describes your impression about the breakaway room that you were in and the clinic that you attended. And then I'll hand over to Laura. Thank you. Laura?
Thank you, Pulang. Welcome back, everyone. So we've gone through and tried to answer many of your questions actually directly by typing our answers in the chat box or in the Q&A box. And I think we'll try to address a couple more questions before we close here. But we just wanted to comment as well that I think many of the questions likely could be either answered in the funding opportunity announcements themselves or maybe best addressed if you reach out to one of the program officer leads that are in this panel, set up a time to talk specifically about your potential application and the kind of areas that you'd like to explore. We're happy to have those conversations. So moving on, just a few of the questions that we'd like to address live right now. There are a number of questions related to informed consent and kind of data collection and sharing, including how are the unique challenges of informed consent to be handled in this type of research? And what are the legal restrictions on the collection, use, and sharing of these types of data? I think it's important to note that a lot of specific answers to these questions are dependent on whether or not, first, if it's pre-existing data that an applicant is planning to use that relies on the existing informed consent, if it's human subject data, or if it's new data that's going to be collected where the applicants and the research team themselves will have to develop the appropriate methods of informed consent. And also have an understanding of what the legal restrictions are on the data that they're working with, whether it's existing or new. But it also brings up the point of the importance of understanding the ethical, legal, and social implications of data science research generally. And I just wanted to have Jay Churchill spend a few minutes speaking to that.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Well, a few minutes is probably far longer than I need for this. I guess I would say whatever answer I give you is probably not going to be a fully satisfying answer to you, because I think this is a really complex question. I will say that there are certainly, as Laura has suggested, many regulatory and institutional, regional, country-specific issues that one needs to carefully consider, especially as you map that onto the different types of data, and also, whether these are existing data or prospective types of data. What I will say, though, is from an ELSI perspective, so from the ethical, legal, and social implications perspective, this is actually a really great opportunity to help embed those types of questions into your research as you go forward. So instead of collecting the data and then thinking about what are the implications of data sharing or informed consent, if you build it in on the front end, and actually the goal is to help strengthen the research itself by embedding that ELSI perspective in there. So we think this is a really great opportunity to think about this moving forward. And if you do have questions about this, please feel free to reach out to me.
Great, thank you, Jay. One other question we'd like to address is related to the Open Data Science Platform. Do you intend to interoperate with other platforms, either under the NIH Data Commons umbrella or otherwise? And do you expect it to run in the cloud? Ishwar, can you address that?
Sure, Laura. I think that's a fantastic question. And basically, interoperability is a key part of the FAIR principles that are a requirement of the funding opportunity announcements. What the FAIR principles are essentially a set of guiding principles in order that the data and any of the digital assets, including the software, can be made findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, with the aim of not only discoverability of the digital assets, but their reuse as to support reproducibility of research. So to answer the question specifically, interoperability is key with other relevant platforms as they support specific scientific questions and use cases. As far as the cloud goes, it depends on the infrastructure and the architecture that is proposed by the applicant. We do encourage you to consider latest technologies that are out there so that you're optimizing and the platform itself is sustainable. And again, I would just put a call out and encourage you, if you're interested in submitting an application for this funding opportunity, to attend the session on the open platform and fostering communities on August 19th.
Perfect, thanks Ishwar. Another question that we wanted to address now is whether or not primary data has to be generated in a research hub, or if a hub can propose to use only pre-existing data sets. Brad, can you address that?
Yeah, so in many settings, there are a lot of data out there that you can utilize already. Epidemiological data, public health data, many different kinds of data sets that you are able to utilize. You are not required to develop a new data set. You can completely utilize what is existing. But there are also opportunities to strengthen current data sets with new data collection. I know that many of you are somewhat concerned about the quality of data that are available right now. And these are opportunities to strengthen that data instead, but you are not required to completely make a new data set whatsoever. You can utilize all pre-existing data.
Great, thank you, Brad. And a final training question that I'll address is whether or not each U2R or the research training program or awards are expected to have a direct link to one or more of the DSI Africa U54 projects. In other words, are trainees in the training grant expected to use the data from the research hubs, or could they just use data outside DSI Africa for their master's and PhD projects? To clarify, while we do intend to provide opportunity through the Coordinating Center for the training grants to collaborate with the U54s through trainee projects, I think we want that to be an available option. It's certainly not something that we expect for applicants to come in linking those programs together from the start, and definitely training programs can propose that their trainees will work on research projects that use data outside of DSI Africa in their applications. But it's important to know that the opportunity to collaborate, we hope will be there and will be kind of a part of the collaborative nature of the DSI African Consortium. And one final question that I wanted to make sure that we addressed, just because it's a relatively simple one, is how many applications can be submitted by any institution. And for the funding opportunities that have been published for this particular program, we don't have a limit on the number of applications that can be submitted. So organizations can submit both to multiple funding opportunities and potentially submit more than one application to a single funding opportunity. But we do want to certainly, remind people to keep in mind that their time is finite, and they may not have the time or resources necessarily to submit so many applications. But it is allowed, and there are no restrictions based on either the organizations that can submit or PIs being listed on multiple grants as well. So I think we'll just end the Q&A there. I know there are a number of questions we did not get a chance to answer, and we received, I think, close to 90 questions. So thank you so much for your interest and enthusiasm for the program. We'll try our best to answer all of these questions through FAQs that we put together for the funding opportunities. We also encourage all of you to attend the office hours that we have scheduled at the end of this 2 weeks on August 20th and 21st to discuss more deeply each of the funding opportunity announcements with each of us, the program officer leads. And also encourage you to schedule time if you want to have an individual conversation with one of us about our funding opportunity announcements, discuss your specific research or research training ideas, either yourself, or we can also do group or team-based calls. I'm more than happy to do that. So for that, I'll hand it back over to Maggie. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you very much. If you have questions still, they'll come up afterwards. Some sort of incubation will have you say, oh, I want to know about this. You can always go back to the Ask Questions to the funding panel page. It will remain live, and add them there so that we can know what you need to know and make sure we get answers to you in some form over the next couple of weeks. So a few more important things to point out. There are more interactive panel sessions this week. The keynote panel on partnerships is tomorrow. And at the session that I was running on maximizing your experience in the symposium, somebody asked the question, how do we know what makes a good partnership? And I said to them, come to the panel session tomorrow, because it's just the kind of question that we'll be answering. So join us tomorrow. The screening is early, 7:30, 2:30, and the interactive session at 9 and 4. On Wednesday, we have another panel, the Innovation and Entrepreneurship panel, also very exciting group of panelists, a screening early, the interactive session just after. Thursday is a marketplace. This is an open space to network and meet potential collaborators. We'll be adding more information to KaiStorm, so watch for that. And incidentally, it's a good idea if you haven't already to bookmark KaiStorm in your browser, so it's really easy to get back to it every day when you come to look at some of the opportunities that are there for you in the symposium. There'll be more interactive panels next week. You can learn more about the rich programs that are offered in the symposium.
Fantastic. We're ready to close. We thank you for spending some time with us. We thank you for your attention. We thank you for great feedback that we have received this far, and we would like you to continue to give us more feedback if you haven't done so yet. We're delighted to see you again tomorrow, and thank you. See you tomorrow.